Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to say just a few words about Cardinal Keith O'Brien. As you know, he handed in his resignation to the Holy Father. In fact, he handed it in last November because his 75th birthday is on the 17th of March. And as there won't be a Pope then, the Pope just yesterday accepted the resignation now. And as regards the Diocese of Edinburgh, there'll be an apostolic administrator appointed by the Pope to go in and govern the diocese, and that will be, I'm quite sure, a senior bishop, and part of his job will be to examine the allegations that have been made, and I think it would be very inappropriate of me to say anything about that while that's going on. So that's my first point. So the three sections I want to speak to you about today. First of all, as I'm going out to Rome tomorrow, is thinking back of the four last popes we've had. I'm thinking of Pope John, called the Second Vatican Council, and was, I suppose, a great favourite with everybody. Good Pope John, he was called. He was humorous, he was down to earth, he was wise, he was, in a good way, he opened the doors of the Catholic Church, and I think was one of the most beloved popes of recent history. He issued a encyclical letter called Pacem in Terre, so all about peace. But what people loved about Pope John was his humanity, his jokes, how many people work in the Vatican? About half. And what about? I belong to the club of the family, all sorts of things. When he went to prison to see the prisoners, he said he'd had an uncle in prison. All these things endeared him by his just very humanity. He was a great man. And so was his successor, Paul VI, I think, who had to conclude the Vatican Council. And I see him very much as a man of dialogue. He was the first Pope to travel abroad. He went to Jerusalem, where he met the Patriarch, and he went to India as well, and he went to the United Nations to appeal for peace. He had a very difficult pontificate, I think, between 1963 and 1978, just trying to bring about the reforms and the renewal of the Second Vatican Council. And then there was Pope John Paul I, or he only lasted a month, and we remember him, I think, particularly by his smile. And when he died, then we had, in this sense, unexpectedly, a man from a far country, namely Pope John Paul, who was a kind of world evangelist, opening the doors of the Church, opened the doors of the world to Jesus Christ. He was an extraordinary man, and I think again will be remembered for so many things. The leitmotif of his papacy was probably the dignity of the human person, the dignity of every human being, and so we remember him, I think, with great affection, as indeed we will do also with Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict, who had a great veneration for Pope John Paul. And if you were to say to me, what is his legacy? I'd say the legacy of Pope Benedict is, first of all, the lucidity of his teaching. In my lifetime, I've never known a pope who's been able to teach, to preach with such clarity and precision and love of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he's a teacher, and I think we'll remember him particularly in this country for his the way he came over to the people here, not as an austere, severe man, but as a humble pastor, a shepherd, and it was very moving, I thought, when he came here for those days in 2010. So the papacy is very important, and the cardinals have a very big job to do. As I've said, I go to Rome tomorrow, and I'm going to tell you just for a few minutes what happens at a conclave. First of all, this is rather a very exceptional one because the Pope has resigned and he's still living. So we don't, as it were, wait for a funeral. We say thank you, as I will do with the other cardinals on Thursday morning when we'll say farewell to Pope Benedict. And then we go in, the cardinals go in to meet together. And I will be with them until the time that they go into the actual conclave. For about 8 to 10 days, we'll be meeting every day to discuss matters that concern the Church, which I'll come to. But as you know, I was present at the conclave in 2005 that elected Pope Benedict, and it is an extraordinary, and that's not just the meetings before, but when you actually process in to the Sistine Chapel. And then we had, I remember we had a sermon from a Capuchin and then to start, and then one of the cardinals says, "Exeunt omnes," which means everybody go out. So all the MCs and the preacher, they all went out, and I heard the thud of the door of the Sistine Chapel. And, I remember looking round and thinking to myself that one of us is going to go out of here with a different cassock on. And so we all, there's scrutineers, 3 cardinals who are scrutineers, and one by one we go up and we put our vote into the golden urn. And as you know, in the Sistine Chapel, you're facing Michelangelo's Last Judgment. And so it's a pretty solemn affair as you go up and you say, before God, I think this is the man who should be the new Pope. And then you wait till everybody's voted, and then the votes are called out one by one. I went over through one interval just to have a look at the place where the smoke went up. In the Sistine Chapel there's a little funnel which goes up through the roof, and there's some special stuff that makes black smoke, and other stuff that makes white smoke. And I was just interested to see. Usually they can't detect the white smoke very clearly. Anyway, and then the last time, I think there were 4 or 5 votes before it was quite clear one man was getting more than anybody else, and he had to get 77, 2/3 plus 1. And I remember going, the senior cardinal going up to Cardinal Ratzinger and said, "Your Eminence, will you accept to be the Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church?" And we all waited. He said, "No, I can't." And then he said, "I accept as the will of God." And then he spoke. And then he said, "What name will you take?" So he said, "Benedict." So he must have kind of thought about it the night before, between you and me, not to be put in the paper. I think all the cardinals had a name up their sleeve, just in case. And anyway, immediately then he went out, and behind there's a tailor, a Vatican tailor, who has 3 cassocks, 3 white cassocks, one large, one medium, and one small. And after about 10 minutes he came back in his white cassock, sat in the middle, and we all went up one by one and kissed his ring and declared our loyalty to him and our fidelity to the faith with his guidance. And then he said, "Now we must go out to the balcony." So we followed him out to the balcony, and then he was announced to the huge crowd outside, and then we went back and had supper with him in the Casa Santa Marta, the place where we were all staying. And so it was a very moving event, and a very solemn event indeed. So naturally now we're going to be thinking about the next Pope. I think I'd like to say first, why is all this so important? I mean, why am I a Christian? Why am I a Catholic? Why do I belong to the Church? Why is the Church important? Well, the Church is important because it preaches and manifests, shows to the world what we believe about Jesus Christ. that he is the salvation of everybody, that he lived and died and rose again, and he's with us still through his Holy Spirit. And I think that what Christian faith brings to the world is what everybody wants, which is meaning and hope. Because I think everybody, whether they're religious or not, wants that to their life, meaning and hope. And we think we have a message that brings meaning and the biggest hope to our world today. So first of all, if I'm talking about the challenges that face the Pope, the new Pope, I'd say first of all that obviously, in the light of what I've said, he has to be a truly spiritual man who's able by his own faith to confirm the faith of other people in Jesus Christ, a faith that affirms that God sent his Son to save the world. So that's number one. Number two, I think the new Pope needs to be, he's a pontifex, and the word means not only a high priest, but also a bridge builder. And I think this next Pope must be a bridge builder, and that means especially with his fellow bishops, but also within the Curia, the people who immediately serve him. And in that, there's no doubt that today that there needs to be renewal in the Church, reform in the Church, and especially of governance. How is the Pope, this next Pope, going to govern the Church? And a lot of the bishops and cardinals think that it's got to be done perhaps in a more collegial way. In other words, those who rule the Church, it's not just the Pope who rules the Church, it's the Pope with the bishops. The Pope is essential as a centre of unity and truth, but he also cannot rule the Church without a real association with the bishops. So, as you know, there have been troubles recently, in the recent years, and scandals. Well, these have got to be addressed, and especially the Pope's own house has to be put in order. And then I think the Pope has got to, the next Pope will have to be a man of dialogue, who dialogues with, especially, of course, with our fellow Christians, so that the quest for Christian unity, which will never cease, will continue. And then there will be dialogue with other religions, other faiths, Hindus and Jews, Buddhism, and especially, of course, Islam. And I think that kind of dialogue with Islam is very important for the Pope, and indeed for all of us, if we're going to have peace in our world. The Pope is he'll also look at the imbalance in our world, between the rich and the poor. It's very interesting, I'm often asked, are we going to have a black Pope next time? Well, we could have a black Pope. We could have a South American Pope. We could have an Asian Pope. You could have any of the cardinals could be elected wherever he comes from, and they could even elect somebody who's not in the conclave at all, somebody outside. So I think the field, as in that sense, is open. It is interesting, though, we were talking about these other continents, how the governance of the Church has changed in terms of the ethnic variety. In 1962, at the beginning of the Vatican Council, pretty well all the bishops were white, but now, and those bishops that were in Africa and Asia were all missionary bishops that came from Europe or America. But now there are native bishops in Africa, in Asia, in America, South America. So the world has changed, and I think that the Church is no longer a Europe, as it were, centred church, but it's truly global. 1.2 billion people, and when we're talking about the Church, we've got to have a Pope who realises that he's like all of us, like all other Christians. He's a Christian among others. St. Augustine once said, I'm a bishop for you, but I'm a Christian with you. And I think we want a Pope who's going to be a Christian with us, as a Pope for us. Now, I think that's all I want to say. We come to the last days of Pope Benedict, and it's been very moving, really. people are greeting him, in a sense sadness that he's going, but understanding the reasons why he has resigned, because of his infirmity and old age. And so we pray for the Pope, and then we pray also for the cardinals and for him who will be elected Pope within the next month. Thank you very much.
I was by John Royces. I just wanted to ask what the resignation of O'Brien yesterday means for the Church, and is this overshadowing the search for the new Pope?
I think clearly the circumstances of his resignation are very sad, and I think, as I said, that those matters will be investigated. I think that you've heard that he's not going to the conclave. I think the cardinals will be discussing all of these, lots of issues that concern reform in the Church. That will carry on. I don't think the resignation of Cardinal O'Brien will affect that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the ability to reform the Curia is one of the qualifications needed for the new Pope?
To reform?
The Curia.
The Curia. Well, I think that clearly those who are in the Curia, those who help the Pope, and that's got to be done. I think there has to clearly there has to be a reform and a renewal there. And why? Because it is a matter of governance, and governance needs to be well established. And whoever is the inverted commas the governor, the Pope, has to have trustworthy assistance. And so if there has been real difficulties in the Curia, that has to be looked at. In fact, I seem to remember that the Pope appointed 3 cardinals to look into some of the things that had been asserted regarding the Curia, and they presented they presented a report to the Pope, which I don't know what's in it. I think the Pope's the only one who has seen it. So maybe we'll be talking about that too.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any ideas of how you might be able to make those reforms?
Well, I suppose I would have a lot of ideas really, but I think I'm not the Pope. I think that the Pope again will have the advice of the cardinals of how he might tackle this question.
Mm-hmm. And one final question, sorry. Do you think the job? Sorry, one final one. Do you think the job of the Pope has become too big and unwieldy for one man to take on?
The Pope, as I've said, rules the Church with the bishops. There'll always be a Pope. There always has been, and there always will.
Michelle. If Cardinal O'Brien has, as he insists, done nothing wrong, do you think it was right and necessary, or even wise for him to step down?
Well, that's a good question. I really don't know. It's up to his own conscience that he stepped down. He he wasn't asked to. He didn't. He decided to do that. As he said in his statement, I think he thought it would be a distraction to be in Rome. I think that was the main reason, because of the media attention that's been focused on him.
But in a sense, there's more media attention now because people and lay Catholics are wondering why a man would step aside if he genuinely has done nothing wrong.
Yes, that was his decision to do so. He wasn't forced to do so, he wasn't asked to do so. He thought, given the publicity of allegations which, as you quite rightly say, are being contested by the Cardinal, that was a better thing to do.
Yes, this is not just about Cardinal O'Brien. You mentioned in your opening speech there that scandals need to be addressed. This is scandals in the United States, across the United States, in Italy itself. Britain is just part of this deeper malaise, at least a publicity of deeper malaise that the Catholic Church is suffering at the moment. Do you think that when the cardinals meet in Rome to elect a new pope, that this issue of alleged cover-ups is going to actually dominate the whole thing, which is why we're here this morning?
I think that the cardinals, when they meet for these 10 days, will be discussing not just one particular incident or what happened or allegations, but this whole some of the scandals that have, I think, afflicted the Church. And I suppose the gravest one over the last years has been the scandal of regarding protection of children.
I don't mean this to be a difficult question, but are these self-inflicted scandals in the sense that the Catholic Church has not addressed them and are still not addressing them?
Oh, well, I think there have to be. There's no doubt in my mind that there has to be reform, that these issues have to be addressed at the highest level, and not only by the Pope but also by the bishops. And I think that will be one of the main things the Cardinal will be discussing. And when a new Pope is elected, he will know very well what the cardinals have discussed, because he'll be part of the discussions. So I think the new Pope will go with a very clear mandate, and I'm sure that the new Pope will also be appointed with a view to a man who's capable of governing, not only those other qualities which I mentioned, but also capable of the kind of reform and renewal that's needed in the Church at the present time. There have been difficulties, there have been scandals, they've got to be addressed, because otherwise, I think there's no doubt, and something which obviously saddens me greatly, that not just the image of the Church, but the effectiveness of the Church in witnessing to the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news, is also affected.
Christopher Lamb from Tablets. You mentioned reform in the Church. A lot of Catholics and priests have included in that celibacy, mandatory celibacy, whether we can ordain married men, women's ministry. Will that be on the agenda for the next Pope?
Well, I think that at the moment the celibacy is mandatory, and may I just mention with regard to that, that celibacy is not only a man is meant to be celibate, he's also meant to be chaste, and therefore, which all people are, so I think, and whether there should be any development with regard to ordination of married men, and there's a difference between ordination of married men and voluntary celibacy. I think that will be a matter that may well come up sometime or other. It'll be up to I think it'll be up to the Pope and the bishops to decide on matters like that. I don't think it'll be first on the agenda of what we're talking about in the pre-conclave.
Rick.
Cardinal Cormac, do you believe that the Church's ability to transmit its message on issues such as gay marriage has been damaged by events in Scotland and the wider Church?
Well, I don't know. I hope not, in a way. I mean, I think the reason why the Catholic Church, and indeed our Anglican friends and others, have been speaking about against gay marriage is really because of the word marriage, what we believe marriage to be. It's not in any way homophobic, and I regret it when some people are saying, well, we're just because we're against people who are homosexual. That is not the point. The point is that for the stability and for the social life of a country, it seems to me marriage has one meaning, of a lifelong relationship between a man and a woman, with the possibility of procreation of children. Now, if you say marriage can also mean something else, I think that's not right. That's what
Which was your personal reaction after Brian's resignation? Were you surprised, sad?
Well, obviously I was very sad, and as I've said, I don't know anything about the details, and I'm sure they'll be addressed. But certainly I was saddened. I know Cardinal O'Brien well, and so I think it's been very sad, and I think that what has happened both for him and for the Church of Scotland has been very, very damaging, and. But I think Cardinal O'Brien, who is a very honest man, will also, whoever goes in, will look at the allegations that have been made, and he himself, as I've said, has contested them. So I think we have to leave it like that.
Pope Benedict's resignation appears to have been followed by a certain degree of disarray within the Church. Is the Pope's resignation an example you think would be a good one for future popes to follow?
Well, there are lots of things one could say about that. I mean, I think that the Pope's resignation, the first in how many, 800 years, is really quite significant. And I think in a way it gives the cardinals who are voting for the next Pope perhaps more freedom. They could. So they're saying we must have a younger pope, or you could also have an older pope with the possibility of resignation. I think Pope Benedict had indicated in many ways that a pope might have to resign, partly because of the age, disability, or any other reason. He had given hints that might have happened. And I suppose, the long period of the decline of Pope John Paul may have affected him in the last 5 years of Pope John Paul, when he was so ill and not able really to fulfill his office fully. So I think there were many reasons which made him think he may have to resign. How it will affect a future pope, but clearly the fact that a pope has resigned means that there's always that possibility. But I still think that most Catholics would like to think the Pope will be able to continue till he dies. So it would have to be very exceptional, I think, if a Pope again retired. But it could happen.
Hello. Right, Sam Jones from The Guardian. 2 quick questions. I was just wondering when you learnt of Cardinal O'Brien's resignation, first of all.
Well, I only heard when he announced it. In fact, he told me the night before that's what he was going to do.
So the Pope decided to accept it. The decision was made apparently on the 18th, that it would take effect from the 18th of February.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a message must have gone to the Pope from the papal nuncio about these allegations, and as he'd already resigned, and how he couldn't wait till the 17th because he'd be gone, and there wouldn't be a Pope, he decided just to put it back. To accept it immediately. Now, whether that was because of the allegations or for I don't want to say.
Okay, and just to follow up quickly, are you sure it was the Cardinal chose to resign, or do you think he was pressured, given the allegations, given the proximity of conclave, maybe to go quickly?
No, I think the Cardinal had already submitted his resignation 3 months ago in November. So, and he had no idea then there was going to be a conclave. So he was already been accepted. His resignation was to be implemented, as it were. There's something in the Church called nunc pro tunc. In other words, resignation is accepted, but it's not for the bishop doesn't actually resign until a particular point. And so the Pope brought back the tunc then. Because of the new Pope, and there wouldn't be a Pope on the 17th of March. So that's why he said, I'll accept it now.
That's why the time frame changed. That's why the time frame changed.
Yes, yes.
Madam Zealand from the Catholic Pope, what will be your fondest memory of the outgoing Pope's pontificate? What will stand out for you in your mind as the most, the happiest moment or the most memorable one?
I think. I have so many memories because I knew him very well. I was absolutely thrilled to go to Westminster Hall, and for everybody there, I was sitting opposite 5 prime ministers, and I hadn't done that before, ex-prime ministers, and then he was able to speak to how many people there? A couple of thousand. About faith and reason, and by the way in which religion in a society is so important, and that if you and that each, as it were, nourishes the other. So he's not saying we're afraid of the secular world. He's saying we live in the secular world and we have a contribution to make. That would be one. And then another time early on, I met him with. Before he was Pope, I met him with a group of Anglican and Free Church leaders. This was after the visit of Pope John Paul to this country, and I went with them. And the thing they wanted, we want to meet Cardinal Ratzinger. So we went in, and he greeted us so courteously. And then he said, had they any questions? And believe you me, they had, between them, they thought out the most difficult questions. So, and when I see the first one was a man called the Archbishop of York, John Hapgood was his name in those days, and he asked a very difficult question. And then he waited for the Pope Cardinal Ratzinger to reply, but the Cardinal said, no, you can all ask your question. And they all asked their difficult questions. And then for about a quarter of an hour he answered them all, but not with absolute brilliance and lucidity and honesty. And I thought to myself then, that man's a great gift to the Church. There are others, but we do it more privately.
John Bingham from Telegraph. You mentioned earlier that Cardinal O'Brien decided voluntarily not to go to the conclave, and perhaps why he didn't want to be the focus of attention. Clearly there are 4 or 5 other cardinals around the world with very serious shadows over their names at the moment, might they also not be wise to ask themselves the same question regarding the focus of attention?
Well, that would be up to them, up to their own conscience, of whether they decide not to go to the conclave. I think I ought to say that there is an obligation on cardinals to go to the conclave, so it'll be a decision in their conscience. And you know, all that and the troubles that there have been will be, again, matters that will be discussed by the cardinals when they meet.
Can I ask, how important do you think it is that a new pope, when he's selected, is free from any kind of taint of cover-up that has affected so many communities throughout the world? I'm especially thinking of very recent comments by Cardinal Turkson about whether such a cover-up could happen in Africa, and he suggested that because of anti-homosexuality laws in Africa, such a scandal would never occur. Would it be? Will you be advising that a new pope should be free of any kind of taint in that sense?
Well, I think the cardinals, when they're choosing new pope, as I've said, I will be there for the discussions, and then I don't go in for the election. But then they'll be thinking of a man of probity, I'm quite sure, you know, you're not going to get a saint straight away, you know, and we're all sinners. But I'm sure the man they elect will be of irreproachable character, as far as you can say, and so I've no worries about that.
What do you think of Cardinal Turkson's comments?
Well, I didn't read them, I must confess. I like Cardinal Turkson. I met him actually just recently, and I said, you know, Eminence, I can't open a newspaper without seeing your face, which is the sort of face of Africa. He's a lovely man, but I didn't read very much what he said.
Cardinal, do you regret that we won't have someone from the British mainland actually voting? And could you tell us why you think Archbishop Vincent hasn't been made a cardinal?
Well, I do regret it, yes, and I'm also very sorry that my successor, Archbishop Nicholas, has not yet been made a cardinal. Well, the main reason for that is, of course, me. I mean, if I were, to put it absolutely bluntly, if I were dead, he will already be a cardinal. But the law is that they didn't want to give England, or England and Wales, more than one vote, and everybody under 80 has a right to vote. So if he'd be made a cardinal, then we'd have 2 votes, and that's why it's been delayed. But I'm sure he will be a cardinal.
You've only just turned 80, and the Pope obviously probably knew a couple of years ago that he might be planning this, judging by the gesture he made on the tomb of the last Pope to resign in such circumstances 20 years ago, or to resign in a similar way. So if he was planning this, surely he should have planned for Vincent to be a cardinal by now, instead of, it almost looks like a deliberate snub.
Oh, I don't think that's true at all. I think he's just abiding by the rules, and I'm sure that Archbishop Vincent will become a cardinal before very long.
Back, I'm afraid, to O'Brien. I can't think of another occasion when priests have made allegations. Plenty of people in congregations have made allegations before, alas, but to have 4 priests, isn't that what makes these as yet unproven allegations so significant, and isn't that a turning point that the church leadership has to deal with? We're actually now having allegations from within the priesthood.
Well, I think, as I've said before, I really, in a way, don't want to comment. There have been allegations, the cardinals contested them, they will be examined, and I think I'd like to leave it like that, really.
Bjorn, I was wondering what your thoughts are on the bringing forward of the conclave, which the Pope has suggested could happen. Do you think they should wait for 15 days? Or?
Yes. Well, you've got to remember that the last time, when Pope John Paul died, we had to wait a week nearly before the funeral, and only then did we have. This time there's no funeral, so the cardinals will immediately go into their discussions. So they might well feel that instead of 15 days, they might lessen it to 10 or 12. But some cardinals, I think it should remain at 15 and sort of further you know, given the situation, that we should fulfil. We don't need 15 days to do all the discussions that are necessary. But I think all the Pope has done is to say you can lessen it if you want to. So I'll know probably by the end of the week whether we're going to do that or not.
Would you like 15 days?
Well, I'm in a slightly different position from some of the others. I do know a lot of the cardinals, and maybe it could be done in 10. I haven't very strong feelings about it, but I wouldn't mind if it went on to 15.
Any last question? No. Okay. Thank you.
Well, may I just say before we conclude, you know, sorry, I suppose I'm, you know, I've been a bishop for 36 years, and a pastor for 56 years, or a priest, and I'm a man of hope, really. I really do. When you say we've had lots of troubles in the church, we have. There have been troubles in the past, and the church has been always able to, as it were, reform itself. There's a Latin tag which says Ecclesia semper reformanda, and the church must always realise, I say church, I mean people, and Christians, that we're weak and that we're sinful, and that these things that happen, but they've got to be repented of, and also reforms have to be made. But I think if you were to say, am I very optimistic or hopeful for the church? Of course I am, because I believe that the Holy Spirit is with the church, and that it will be in the way it's not known to us with the cardinals when they choose the next pope. And as I've said, the Pope has I think a wonderful task of teaching and preserving unity and truth. And so I am really very hopeful that in spite of difficulties, the church will overcome them, will face them, and that the governance of the church will be secure, and it will continue with its message of bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to all of us.